What does it mean to travel? Why are people so used to their place of living that they cease to appreciate it the way outsiders do? Why do we even want to travel? What is the appeal in that? And what is it like during travel, and what is the aftermath? Why do people seem to be so attracted to the touristy areas? I have not traveled internationally in at least 7 years. I have never traveled alone. And this time, I'm traveling alone to another continent. And I wonder, how will I transform during travel? How will my perspectives and perhaps even my way of living change as a result? I think about the possible problematic areas too. What if I get lost and I have nobody to help me? What if I need help but I cannot understand anyone and nobody can understand me? And what if I run late and miss my flight or my train? I wonder what I will regret on this trip and what I will learn. There is another reason why this trip is different. This time I'm being sent by my company, and this time it feels like I have won. This time it feels like I'm going because I am worth it, and I want to prove that I am good enough. It almost feels like I'm on a mission to prove to the people above me that I am the right person for the position, and because of that, I want to be in top performance mode. This travel will happen in 2 parts. Part 1, I will train in the company's headquarters in the city, and Part 2, I will be staying with some friends in the countryside. And when I think about exploring the surrounding areas, walking around by myself, I believe that I want to stick to the smaller areas, the areas that are less touristy, because I really want to see how normal people live, how they go about their daily lives in a regular basis. I've been listening to Dutch podcasts between native speakers lately, mostly on Spotify, and so what I'll do is I'll type a word in English into Google's Translate, get a Dutch word, and then plug that back into Spotify. And the reason why I do it with native speakers or find podcasts with native speakers is because I want to see what elements of the natural flow of the language come out, rather than having a podcast that is trying to teach me Dutch, which in that case they might speak slower, they might not use normal language, like they might just be a little bit more formal, or speak in English a little bit too much. Packing was really stressful, and I actually ended up packing last minute rather than, packing in advance, which I had hoped to do. And with packing, I had actually got a ton of help from my mom as well. She's more familiar with travel and the right things to bring, and she recognizes when it's just too much stuff to bring as well. Another thing that I was worried about was not being able to access Notion pages while offline when I didn't have access to the internet. And so what I did is I ended up downloading Obsidian, which is another note-taking app. Being in a different country, I imagine that no one will speak English and that I will get lost and have nobody to help me, and I won't be able to understand anyone who tries to help. Istanbul airport is very large. I looked up a map, I watched a video, I printed out a map too. There are about 5 terminals, and apparently it can take about 30 minutes, half an hour, to get from one end to the other, and that's all by walking. It is a chance to capture footage in an environment that I have never been to. I am very certain that I want to bring my camera and that I want to film as much as possible. A huge part of this trip is forever lost, and by this I mean that I didn't learn enough Dutch to understand when people spoke in their native language, and also I failed to express myself in that native language. I didn't communicate to a significant degree in Dutch. I could not express myself in the language. And it's a similar thing with French, although with French I do understand a greater amount than I do in Dutch. So it makes me wonder, how much did I miss? And thinking about this over the past few weeks, I think I've missed so much. So despite this feeling of loss, I do feel that on the flip side, this was motivation to dig deeper into learning French and learning Dutch, at least to the point that I am able to understand native speakers, and so that they don't have to switch to English, so that I can get the idea of what they're saying. And I think ideally I would also be able to reply and express myself fully in Dutch and French, but perhaps I think in the beginning stages I would need to reply a little bit in English, but at least in that case they wouldn't need to switch to English for me to understand them. And on this trail of ideas, I feel that the first stage of language learning is listening. And then I think that after listening and understanding the language comes speaking, and after speaking comes writing. I would like to think of myself as not a tourist. I don't know, for some reason I associate the word tourist with being shallow. And although, well, I would not like to be called a tourist, my fascination with cobblestone roads, old architecture, and just general culture in that space would make me stand out from the locals. And now I'm equating curiosity and interest with shallowness, with a willingness to just take what's at first glance and not dig deeper. Well, curiosity and interest would suggest otherwise. So I'm not quite sure how I made that connection. But digging just a little bit into what I know of biology and science is that really it should come as little surprise that I'm taking vastly more interest in a new environment than one that I'm very familiar with, such as my hometown. I was reading this book here called Wired by David Eagleman, and this is a book about the brain, and in it there was this thing called the Troxler effect, which basically is stating that brains care about change. Things that don't offer new information are ignored. So just for example, in our eye, and I'll read a passage from the book here. First it shows an image of the eye and all of the vessels there, and the description says, the retina is blanketed by a meshwork of blood vessels. Because these sit between the world and our photoreceptors, we should see them superimposed on the visual scene. But the vessel's pattern is stable, and hence carries no new information. And so our visual systems learn to ignore them completely. And so perhaps the Troxler effect might help a little bit with explaining why I have this fascination with the places I travel to. I find quite a bit of wonder and imagination when walking through the old city. It was just like walking through and imagining a city that has seen so much change, that has lived through so many years. It makes me wonder, if the buildings could speak English or any other human language, what stories would they tell? I wonder what we would be able to uncover, what information is there that the buildings have witnessed that didn't make the history books. That didn't make the history books not out of justice, but to serve someone's self-interest. So in a way, I wonder what stories they would tell us that we don't really want to hear, but that happened nonetheless. My fascination with old buildings, ones that have a different purpose now than they did in the past, and ones that have a similar purpose to what they have now, it's not an exact travel through time, but it's able to spark my imagination in a way that I don't quite receive when living in my hometown. At one point I had turned on some music, some of it instrumental, some of it with lyrics, and I walked upon the cobblestone roads, and it made me wonder, am I trying to capture something as a modern person trying to travel back into the past? It was almost like walking through the ghosts of the past, walking past them even. I think about all of the people who must have passed on the same roads I did, some of them still alive in our modern world, and many of them dead. The ones who built the roads literally, the ones who ordered the roads to be built. The same with the old buildings as well. All those people, gone. Inability to relax. This travel experience came in 2 parts, and I felt I couldn't unwind, couldn't relax in part 2. I had this urge to keep checking my emails, to continue to be on duty. Maybe it was misplaced guilt of resting or finally getting a break, of stepping back, taking a few unsupervised breaths, of not being constantly on and constantly available, but to just take a break. After 2 to 3 days of being out of office, I found the strength to resist the urge to physically check my emails. But that doesn't mean that I didn't think of them. I thought of them, and it still felt like I was somehow busy. What is it with this, I wonder? To where my culture gives me 10 days of vacation and then somehow creates this pressure, this guilt that comes alive when I finally do take those days off. Filming and detachment. We have to understand that this comes with 2 mindsets, or 2 personas I felt I had. One was the one who wanted to be immersed, fully present, and enjoy the experience in real life while taking minimal amount of footage, focusing minimally on the camera settings, on the lens, on the focus, etc. And persona 2, or mindset 2, was the filmer, the one who wanted to secure memories on an SD card, the one who wanted to invest time and energy and effort into the camera settings, into the focus, into capturing all these moments with a camera, and paying the price of not having as full as memories as possible. So a question that arises here is, how can I even separate these 2 mindsets? The filmer one and the non-filmer one. Thinking back to my time of traveling, I do wish to go back, to do it correctly, to be more immersed in the non-filmer persona. And the questions this brings up, or the ideas this brings up, are, well, first of all, will I ever get the chance to return again? It's a kind of desperation to do it again, but to do it right. I wonder, what if I had only taken 1 image? What if I had filmed only 1 video, no longer than 30 minutes? And another thing I wonder about is how much I regret it, because this regret, or this regret of not being fully present, is the price of having solid evidence, vivid footage of a few moments there. Of course, I realize now that, or was realizing then also, that a camera, whether it's a literal camera like I'm using now, or a phone, these are limited. These are not human eyes, these are not human brains or perceptions. They are ways to image the world, but they are limited. For example, when I was in the cathedral, which I experienced as being very tall compared to the buildings I'm used to, very tall, very large, very grand, I felt like the camera had a little bit of trouble capturing that. At the same time, fully experiencing something, fully having a memory in my head, those will die too. While on an SD card, while it is a limited capture of an experience, at least that will be vivid. It doesn't matter if I pull it out in 5 years or 20 years, as long as all the technical items are working, that video, that image will be as vivid as ever. While my brain and my memory, well, those images or experiences, those will have weakened somewhat. Do I prolong the vividness of a memory by filming and pay the price of having a weaker memory of it, or do I pay the price of not having as vivid an image, but to, in benefit, get the full experience, whatever that may be? I also wonder if I should have known better, planned better perhaps, on how to face and how to find a compromise between these 2 concepts, these 2 mindsets. My trip made me realize even more strongly how much I don't like goodbyes. The act of saying goodbye is harder than I would have thought. For me, saying goodbye is to leave another person behind, not knowing if I will meet them ever again in person, not knowing when I will have the chance to bask in their presence once more. I feel like in those moments that I'm saying goodbye, that I'm trying to pull something back to return, something that will inevitably leave me. Like something, a human bond, will disappear or dissolve into nothing. And everything, the bank account of interaction, of trust, of meaning, will fade away to something meaningless. And only a sense of nostalgia will remain, a sense of longing for extended time together. I fear that I won't get to see the person again in real life. And it's almost the pain of losing someone, the pain level depending on the certainty I have on when I'll see them once more. But I feel that the challenge I feel to say goodbye is only due to my attachment to another human being. If I were not as attached, then I don't imagine I'd have the same struggle in saying goodbye. The same internal feelings of losing someone, not to death, but to time, to the unknown of whether I'll see them again in person. I feel that I did a first of my first goodbyes wrong. I felt that I rushed them when they didn't have to be, and I regret that. I feel like I was not fully in the moment, I was not fully present, but instead my overlying thoughts were concerns about whether I would still be on time to catch my next train. And I believe this ties into my fear of being late. I so despise being late and the consequences and impressions that makes. The truth is, I was late to meet my contact in France, and though I arrived to the station early, I still missed my train from Antwerpen to Hasselt. I cannot say that I've learned to say goodbye without feeling I'm about to lose someone, but hopefully I've gotten a tad better at not rushing goodbyes when they don't need to be rushed. I think that at the root of it, vulnerability is the willingness to embarrass myself, to make public or mistakes in public, to stumble over words, to mispronounce Dutch words that I'm trying to basically just copy from other people, to receive rapid feedback on my pronunciation when I ask for it, and to just keep learning that my incompetence in French or Dutch or any other language really is simply because I do not know how to speak it, and if I did fluently, that I wouldn't feel that way. And I think that it serves as a bit of motivation to learn these languages, to go deeper. And as for trying to copy words or copy little phrases from native speakers in order to get around simply just saying thank you, saying please. These are very, very simple things. And the most I got up to was just saying one sentence or one word even. But in that, when I was able to go to a store and not have the cashier speak English to me, I felt good inside. And when I went to a cafe and was able to request a croissant and complete the transaction without the employee speaking English to me, by me putting myself out there and speaking the tiny bits of words that I know, the native speaker does not revert to English because, well, they believe that they can complete the transaction without having to leave their native language. Can't really fully be described in words, but that you just have to experience to know how it feels. Now, of course, a large part of this, not speaking Dutch or not speaking French, this is the main area in which caused me to be the odd one out, because I wasn't fluent in speaking, and I definitely wasn't fluent in being able to understand just when I hear the language. So a lot of times, people would have conversations, and a lot of times I couldn't understand what they were saying, but I didn't really mind it was more an interesting situation to be in when I get to hear a language that is not my own being spoken and trying to grasp little pieces of context to make small guesses in my mind of what the topic of conversation might be. Yes, it's being the odd one out, but it's also a way to realize that I have, well, one, so much to learn, and two, there is something else out there that is very, well, perhaps not tangible, but it's very real, and that is possible to grasp. And the next level, of course, to this is asking for direct feedback. How was my pronunciation? Did I say that right? How do you say it? The list goes on. Now, this is probably the hardest part because this is directly admitting that I am wrong and that I need to be corrected, which, if I'm like any other human being, I don't like being wrong. I want to be correct. So this is probably the hardest stage to get to. And I can't say I have fully succeeded in this one. Okay, so another thing about traveling and being the odd one out is the completely new location. And it's just interesting how in a completely new place, I am incapable of navigating myself without a map, at least in the first few days. And then gradually as I walked and biked around a little more, then I was able to navigate to certain places without a map. But it also brings up this feeling that if I had to turn around or I had to check my map because I had got lost or I didn't know where I was going, it's kind of embarrassing. It felt like I should know, and yet, just from a logical point of view, if I had never walked that path alone, it makes sense that I would not know exactly where I was going. I would somehow need some guidance, whether from a person or a map. Just before the ending, why we travel or why we want to. Maybe we're each trying to feel like a child again, to experience that childhood wonder and awe. And perhaps we think that by traveling, we will be able to achieve this feeling. Traveling to a new place, to a new environment, where we have a greater chance of being surprised and feeling wonder, interest, like there's a point to life, and feeling like we're witnessing something that is meaningful and historic. Maybe travel is a way that we reconnect with the world, or even reconnect with ourselves, to find something truly interesting, worth knowing about, and that sparks the imagination. Perhaps we value unpredictability a little bit more than we'd like to admit, and maybe we travel because we want to stop feeling so stale, like we're always living in the same place, always doing the same things, and learning nothing impactfully new. What really matters? If I think to the end of my life cycle, which is death, then I hope I will get a stronger sense of what actually matters. And I imagine that at that point, what's going to really matter to me is the human connections I cultivated throughout my life, the people that I interacted and created memories with, regardless of whether I'm still in contact with them at that point. In fact, it will probably be the case that I will not be. At least for some of the people I know, because they will probably have passed before I will. What really matters is the bond with another human being. The interactions, the conversations, the transfer of information we had, the inner jokes, the laughs, the silent understandings, and the cohesion of meaning, the degree of trust we had in each other, and the feelings of friendship, joy, and the celebration of life together in our shared moments, when the depth of our connection was strong enough to enable us to understand what was never spoken aloud, but what was meant all along, underneath the surface of noise, and in the abyss of silence, posture, gesture, and behavior, and also in our moments apart, overseas, across time zones, and when we only saw each other in person once or twice, even when our interaction was only a few hours, too short to properly continue building a bond in person, when electronic messaging was the main way we communicated, and when the closest form of communication was online video call. And it is only at death that I think that I will truly understand what mattered most in my life. What I will strive towards now is to understand the patterns of what really matters. attempt to predict the thoughts and feelings that will pass through in my moment of death. I feel that I will care most about the quantity of quality relationships I've had, and I do hope that I will continue to discover what else might be of such strong significance. Because so far, my story isn't finished yet. I expect that my lifespan will go beyond the next few hours, into the beyond, into the unknown future.